What happens whenever you talk about conditions of release, for example, there's two things that the judge takes into account: risk of flight and danger to the public. And so that he must have been convinced that they don't pose a risk of flight, or they can set of conditions that ameliorates the risk of harm to the public. I don't know that it says much about the strength of the government's case, because the strength of the government's case isn't something that they generally take into account. But the notoriety of it makes it so that Tate can't really walk or go anywhere without being spotted. So that might have played a bigger factor into it.
Of course, those factors were in place 3 months ago, but something has clearly changed, but it's not clear what.
I think it's probably the notoriety of the case, and his lawyers probably argued, okay, we can put them on home confinement. They're going to be watched. They're so out there now, and everybody knows who they are. There's just no way they could make a move. And that's the only thing I can think of. Their case is still the same case that they had at the beginning. Well, yeah, they have to try this case by June, otherwise it gets dismissed. But anytime your client is out of custody, it really helps a ton. They will be able to go to their lawyer's office with permission. They will be able to call their lawyer at will and review documents, and it just makes it so much easier.
Yeah, absolutely. That certainly is a big concern, especially when you look at the nature of a sex trafficking or human trafficking allegation. The whole impetus behind that is that the perpetrator has some sort of coercive control, whether it's physical, whether it's mental, whether it's sexual, that they have a control over the victims. That's how these sex trafficking and these human trafficking schemes work. So the risk is that if they are free, or at least not in custody, that they could continue to exert that force, whether it's direct or indirect, using physical or mental tools. Absolutely. It's a big challenge for prosecutors and for attorneys representing victims of human trafficking and alleged sex trafficking, because oftentimes you're not seeing what you would expect that you see in the movies, where the victims are in a literal physical cage or actually physically held against their will. Typically, it's more of a coercive control, what we sort of call an invisible cage, an invisible prison, where they are forced to do things, mentally, physically, but without the physical shackles that you would see, in a movie, or what you would expect when you hear about a human trafficking case. So yeah, it actually is very difficult to prove those types of coercive control cases. Not necessarily accepted on its face. Certainly, it is something the defense will use. But again, in my experience, representing victims of alleged human trafficking or alleged sex trafficking, often there is quite a long period until the victim realizes that they're a victim. I almost compare it to sort of what we see in cults, where it takes a long time to sort of convince the victim and make the victim realize that, wow, they are in fact a victim. Because remember, the tactics that perpetrators use in your typical sex trafficking or human trafficking case is to convince the victim that they are not a victim. That's how they exert their control over the victim.
Bruce, you wanted to come in at this point?
Yeah, it doesn't always have to be this physical control. I mean, financial coercion is just as powerful. I mean, sure, they might be free to go, but guess what? They don't have any money. They don't have their passports. They can't go anywhere, and they've said that in some of these text messages. And on the issue of influencing witnesses, I read an article where one of the lawyers threatened to sue one of the American women that were there, victims or otherwise, for defamation, and to try to get her to not come back and talk about the Tate brothers. So I don't know if that's not. I haven't confirmed that, but I've seen it where the financial coercion is, and fraud. Andrew Tate himself has said that he has told the girls, oh, I need to add another 20% for taxes. Well, he doesn't pay any taxes, and that's another one of his charges. But and so he's claiming that they only get 30%. He takes another 20% for taxes, and it's not true. So all the other aspects, other than just physical, the physical aspect of keeping somebody there, you can keep somebody there by financial coercion too.
Yeah, and Bruce,
Well, looking from an American standard of criminal justice, certainly every person who's accused of a crime deserves their day in court. They deserve the chance to confront witnesses, and they are innocent until proven guilty. I'm certainly not an expert on the Romanian criminal justice system. I understand there are some stark differences. For instance, in Romania, you don't get a jury trial; you get a judge trial. And Andrew Tate, from what I can tell, at least his perception in the United States, he's a very unsympathetic figure. Based on things that he's sort of bragged about. But certainly, that aside, and looking at it from an American standard of justice, every person who's accused of a crime absolutely deserves their day in court and is innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah, and just on that point, obviously his lawyer has said there's a great difference between Andrew Tate, the character that you see online, and the real Andrew Tate. I know that some of you would dispute that, but that is what is put forward in his defense. Aric Vidali and Bruce Rivers, thank you both very much for your contributions to the Nexus today.